Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. And Assalamu alaikum. So today we're gonna start a topic. Actually, we're gonna study a chemical compound. The name of this chemical compound is methylene chloride. As you can see, its structure it is tetrahedral and it has the bond angle of 109.5 degree. In this lesson, we're gonna study the properties, the production, the uses, and much more. It's the effects, the harmful effects, and also first aid measures. How can we save ourselves from its exposure? So let's get started. The first slide that we have is about its production. It was first prepared by a French chemist, Henri Victor Regnault, in 1839. He has isolated it from chlorine and chloromethane mixture by exposing it to sunlight. So, when any compound it is prepared by a chemist, or can also be found naturally if you talk about the occurrence. Similar is the case with methylene chloride. It also have some natural sources such as oceanic sources, macroalgae, wetlands, volcanoes. But majority of methylene chloride in the environment is the result of industrial emission. Many work has been done in industries and they emit so many gases. So methylene chloride is also one of them that is being emitted from industries. So, if you talk about commercial production, so methylene chloride is commercially produced along with methyl chloride, chloroform, carbon tetrachloride by the chlorination of methane. So, there's a method of chlorination. If you talk about chlorination of methane, it is done in the presence of HV rays or sunlight. But it has these byproducts, the chloroform, carbon tetrachloride. So we don't usually use this method to produce methylene chloride. But if we need other products, if other products are also desired, then we usually practice this method, the method of chlorination of methane, and we can obtain methylene chloride along with other products. It is a benefit also, and it is a drawback too. It can be considered as both. So it was about the production, how it was prepared with the help of sunlight by the method of chlorination. Now let's go to the next slide, which is the names. We have some names of chloromethane. It is methylene dichloride, methylene chloride, solmethine, narcotyl, and solestine. There are many other names that I haven't mentioned over here, but we have them too. Actually, these names might be derived due to its properties or some actions that they're showing. It can be a smell too. According to their behavior, the names are given. So, methylene chloride, it is a compound which have other names too, as you can see over here. These names can also be used for them, but commonly we use, IUPAC name. We use this name like methylene dichloride. It tells us about the structure. You can see the first two names that we have. We can just imagine from myth, we can imagine that it is derived from methane, CH4. So methylene ene tells us that it has a double bond in it. Di means two and chloride means chlorine. So it is a structure which have two chlorine. It has a double bond. Meth is derived from methane. So we can just make a view about its structure. IUPAC name helps us in that. While other names, if you talk about solmethine, narcotyl, or solestine, they don't just give us the perfect view about how we can just imagine its structure. So the names really matters. They tell the properties. There might be meanings of the names too that I am not going to mention over here, but we will study them any other day. So let's get to the next slide. Next slide are the uses. Now let's see where we're gonna use the methylene chloride. First of all, we have is consumer products. Actually, dichloromethane may be formed from natural resources as we have studied before, but they are not believed to contribute significantly to the global release. Dichloromethane is used in consumer products. Now, what are consumer products? First, we're going to see to the word. Actually, the final goods these are the final goods. These are the products that are bought by individuals or household or any person for their personal use. So the products that are bought for personal use, such products are called consumer products. I'm gonna give you an example. For example, magazines, candies, toothpaste, drinks, paints that we use for our daily life. The final goods that we use in our daily life for our personal use, these products are consumer products. Now, you can't even imagine that the sprays you're using, household cleaning products that you're using, they have dichloromethane. Means it is so important for us. So if you talk about consumer products, it is used as a paint strippers with dichloromethane content of 70 to 75%. 70 to 75% content of dichloromethane is used in consumer products. If you talk about hairsprays, then hairsprays are also contain dichloromethane as a solvent. Now, what is a solvent? Solvent is actually it is used to dissolve the other elements. It is able to dissolve the other elements in a solvent. So dichloromethane is also used as a solvent in hairsprays. As you know, the hairsprays have a liquidy texture, liquid. So the solvent in hairsprays is dichloromethane. Other products that we use for household cleanings, rooms, deodorants that we use, deodorants that give us a good scent, lubricating, and also in degreasing products. Now, what is degrease means? Degrease means it's a chemical product that helps to remove grease. The surface become greasy, oily. To remove that grease, dichloromethane is used. So when something or any chemical product is used to remove the grease, we call it degreasing product. It's degreasing. It's with G, not decreasing or lessening. It's with G. So it also contains in aerosols form. They also contains DCM, dichloromethane, as a solvent. Now, if you talk about industries, then dichloromethane is also used in industries, in factories, in many industries, also for cleaning, for manufacturing. It also have some risks which we're gonna discuss later. First, we're gonna see the uses in to varnish the striper formulation, in the extraction of food, also for plastic processing. If you're making a plastic processing, in that process also it is used. It is also used for metal and textile treatment. It is used to remove caffeine from unroasted coffee beans. You might have seen the coffee beans that we use in winter. So they have this caffeine in them. So it is used to remove that caffeine so we can get uncaffeinated coffee. And the spices we use in our daily life to make foods like biryani, korma, they have the spices, and also to flavor our food. We use so many spices. So they all have some amount of dichloromethane. If you talk about industries or a large scale, then you might be obvious that airplanes, railway road tracks, they have the metal surfaces. to decrease their metal surfaces, to remove the grease from their metal surfaces, dichloromethane is used. It is also used in spacecraft, okay, and laboratory where people used to do experiments. Of course, chemical, it was prepared by the French chemist, of course, in a laboratory or in a place where we used to do experiments. So in laboratory, it is used to extract the chemicals from plants and foods. Now, why we have to extract the chemicals from plants and foods? To make medicines. The medicines you use in your daily life, such as antibiotics or other, they also have dichloromethane. So it has a very wide application in our life. After reading this lecture or listening to it, you might be obvious that it is very important for our life. So the chemist has done really a great job. The next slide, we have methylene chloride in a tank, sort of tank, and here we have goof of Jasco products, premium paint and epoxy remover. It is used to remove paint, epoxy. We have pro scraper. You can see in the picture, it is removing a sort of grease from the flour. From the flour, it is removing the grease. So it is used in many products. As you can see, these products are been selling in the markets. You can also buy them too. And behind these products, you can see the ingredients sort of stuff. You can see there will be methylene chloride. But you can also see a sign of warning written with red color. What does this warning shows? This warning shows that these products should be used not in open case. You have to also take care of yourself while using these products. They are harmful. They should be used very precautionally, very safely. So according to their risks, we're going to study in the next slide that what kind of risk it can cause, what can happen if it touches your skin, what happens if it touches your eyes, what happens if you breathe it. We're going to study these things in the next slide. So the warning sign is written with red to make you aware that it is not a thing to play with. It is not a thing that children can just take and enjoy with it. So you have to be aware of that too. So in the next slide, okay, now we have properties. Let's see the properties of methylene chloride. The first property is toxicity. Now, what is toxic? The word toxic means. Toxic means poisonous, harmful. So, but in case of methylene chloride, if you see that methylene chloride is the least toxic of simple chlorohydrocarbons. If you see the class of chlorohydrocarbons, you will see. Now, what are chlorohydrocarbons? The compounds that have carbons. Chloro means chlorine and hydro means hydrogen. The compounds that have chlorine, hydrogen and carbons are chlorohydrocarbons. All the types of chlorohydrocarbons that we have, methylene chloride is the least toxic one. But still it has some serious health risks. It's high volatility. Now you can see volatile. What does the word volatile means? Volatile means that liquid that can easily be evaporated at normal temperature. As you can see, it is colorless and it can easily be evaporated. So volatile means that it can easily be evaporated at normal temperature. So because it can easily be evaporated, it is inhalation hazard. It makes it an acute inhalation hazard. It can be very harmful. We can inhale it. We're going to study it in the risks that what happens if we inhale it. As it is volatile, it can be just evaporated into the air, and as we breathe the air, it can go inside our body. What will happen? We will see it in the next slides. Okay, so it is polar. Now, what does the word polar means? Polar is actually the particles that have large partial charges. solvent that has a large partial charge. It's a polar solvent or dipole movements. Like you can see, the polar solvent that we have is the most commonly used is water. Okay, and if you see the smell, if you look at the sweet, it has a very sweet penetrating odor. Now, what does the word odor mean? It means smell. Mostly the smell, it smells like chloroform. Its smell is like chloroform. Next we have density, which is 1.3266 grams per centimeter cube. Its melting point is minus or negative 96.7 degrees Celsius. Its molecular weight is 84.93 grams per mole. So you have studied its properties, from which the most important point is volatile, toxicity, smells. While seeing the properties, you can just identify the compound. You can differentiate between the chemical compounds, because many chemical compounds do have similar, do have different, but they might have different densities, melting point, molecular weight. All cannot be just be same. So it is a fact that you can just make it aware. You can just identify the different types of chemical compounds from their properties. So properties really matter. They are very important. They matter for every chemical compound. Now let's go to the next slide. Next we have is the Lewis structure. We have studied this topic a week ago. In this topic we have studied that what does Lewis dot structure tells us. It tells us that which atom is attached to which atom. It does not tell us the geometry of the atoms or the orbitals. You can see the structure. And this carbon is attached with 2 hydrogen, 2 chlorine. It's not telling its geometry or shape. It's just attached around the carbon. Now, what are the steps used to draw the structure? You have to count the electrons, the total electrons in the valence shell. You have to make the bonds. You have to minus the electrons that were used to make the bonds. Then you have to complete the octet of the outer electrons by giving them 8 electrons as a total. But for hydrogen, 2 is the maximum, okay? Because it's happy with 2 electrons. He's not greedy. Hydrogen is not greedy. It don't want 8 electrons. It is stable with 2, and that's enough for hydrogen. And chlorine says no, I want 8 all. So we have given it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons, both chlorines. And carbon also have its maximum covalency. It's forming 4 bonds because it belongs to the 4 group. So this was the Lewis structure. It tells us only that which attachment is attached to which. No hybridization concept, no angle, nothing. So the next slide that we have tells us about dichloromethane CH2Cl2. As you know, it's an organic compound. It's a polar molecule. The CH bonds, because their electronegativity difference is 4, but the CCl bonds have an electronegativity of 5. Electronegativity difference of 5. So they are polar. Dichloromethane is asymmetrical, which in turn makes it polar. The shape of the molecule is tetrahedral, as I have discussed before, and the angle, I hope so you remember it, it's 109.5 degree. It is made up of 1 carbon atom, 2 hydrogen atoms, and 2 chlorine atoms. So this was just the model of methylene chloride. As you can see, there is a structure over here with green color showing chlorine, white showing is hydrogen, and black as carbon. It's just the 3D structure of how it looks. The lines that we're drawing for the bonds, these are just imaginary. They are not actually present over there. They are just imaginary lines. Don't just give yourself a wrong concept about these lines. They are just imaginary. The bonds are created by overlapping. The atoms overlap, okay? Orbitals overlap. So let's go to the next slide. We have hydrogen bonding. Whenever hydrogen makes a bond, it is called hydrogen bonding. So, methylene chloride is a Lewis acid that can hydrogen bond to electron donors. It is a very hard acid. Now, what does hard acid means? Hard acid means that it is not very polarizable and it have very high charge density. Okay, and it is a class of chloromethane, chlorohydrocarbons, as discussed before. So in this diagram you can see its geometrical structure. You can see that carbon has 4 electrons in its valence shell, chlorine has 7, and because 2 chlorines are used, so we're going to multiply 2 with 7. Hydrogen have 1 electron in its valence shell, 2 hydrogens are used, so 2 is multiplied with 1. So total we have 20 electrons, and we have to manage these electrons along 2 chlorine atoms, 2 hydrogen atoms, and 1 carbon atom. This was the hydrogen bonding between the carbon atom. The carbon atom also uses the hydrogen bond, and also it makes with halogen, chlorine, which is used as a halogen over here. So let's go to the next slide. Now we have main risks. Now we're gonna see the risks of methylene chloride or dichloromethane. Most poisonings are poisoning. So most poisonings are due to accidental inhalation. Accidentally, if we have inhaled methylene chloride, poisoning happens. Now what happens when it is inhaled? It is absorbed into our bloodstream and it gives rise to carbon monoxide, which is very harmful. It can cause headache. It can cause, now what is headache? Ache means pain, head means head, so it's pain in head. And nausea. Nausea is the sickness which causes you to just give up the vomit. It's sickness which forces you to vomit. With high concentration of depressed central nervous system, it can cause you depression. So it is very harmful for you too. If it is inhaled, most probably. It have some clinical effects. Inhalation of vapor may give rise to dizziness. Now what is dizziness? When you're not in your conscious state, you can't see the things clearly. You can just see blur, and you cannot just identify who is standing in front of you. You feel dizziness. Nausea, same as discussed before. Clinical effects also include this. Sense of heat. You can feel sense of heat. You're gonna just feel like heat is coming out of your body. You're gonna feel warm heat, and you feel dullness. Your face will be dull. Your body will feel dullness. But if you've inhaled it for a very long, if you have inhaled a very high concentration, it can also lead to coma, unconsciousness. Coma means that you're you're alive, you're breathing in, you're breathing out, but you won't respond. You won't be able to move. You will be in a half conscious state. You can see, but you cannot say something. I think you can't even see in it. It's a state where you can just breathe, you won't respond. And if it a very high concentration is gotten into your body, it can also lead to death. And death means the end. You're not alive anymore. So instead of getting affected by this chemical compound, you have to take some precautions. You have to wear gloves. You have to protect yourself from these risks. Okay, you have to take first aid measures to protect yourself from these risks, because it can be very harmful for you. Because these chemical compounds that we have, all the compounds that we have, all of them have risks. All of them are dangerous. For example, when workers, the workers are at risk when they're for the work who works in laboratories, when they're exposed to CH2Cl2, chloromethane, dichloromethane. For instance, you can take an example of bathtub refresheners exposed to glazing fumes. They can be exposed to glazing fumes, but you should be careful. Workers who use paint stripping products, as I've shown you before, the paint stripping products, those workers should be careful. They are at risks. They are at risks. Factories worked involved in metal cleaning and also degreasing, they're also at risk. Employees who work in pharmaceutical manufacturing, they're also in risk. Now, what is pharmaceutical means? It is a substance which is used in diagnosis, treatment, or prevention of diseases in medical cases. So they're all at risk. So you really have to be in you have to be in your conscious state when you're just placing with it, because it can really be very harmful. It can cause you many risks. What if you're exposed to it? What if it has touched you? What if something has happened? What should you do? That I'm gonna tell you in my another slide. One of its things is also it can cause cancer. It can harm your eyes, it can harm your skin, your liver, and even your heart. It depends upon the level of dose and duration you have worked on it. The level of exposure depends upon the dose, duration, and work being done. Okay, so you have to be very careful while using these kind of chemical compounds. There are also many other chemical compounds like acids that we have. There are so many acids that are very harmful for us. So that's why whenever you are in a laboratory, your teacher guided you not to touch anything without the permission. Use gloves, use your lab coat. So it's all for your safety, because these chemical compounds, they can cause you death in a second, in a minute. They can be very, very dangerous. They can be very harmful, poisonous, toxic. So you just have to protect yourself. You just have to save yourself from these. They're just like the dangers that are trying to kill you. They're your evil spirits or enemies. So you have to be aware from these chemical compounds. Okay? So the next slide we have lungs, the affected lungs. If it is inhaled, it will go to your lungs. You can see that arrow, it is showing that this part of the lung is affected. You can see the two lungs, you can see the difference, you can see what happens. So as I have discussed before, that it can cause cancer, liver, heart, it can affect any part of your body, inside your body, if it is inhaled. Now, inhalation probability is possible because it is volatile. It can be evaporated into the air as you do breathe oxygen in. So you can also breathe in with it. You can breathe in methylene chloride with your oxygen gas. So you really have to be careful that you're not around a laboratory in which it is very evaporated. So you cannot just play with it. It's a very dangerous compound and it can affect your lungs. You can see that in this slide. So it's very harmful for our body. Now let's go to the next slide. First aid measures. Now what if we have inhaled it? What if we have ingested? What if it has been contact within our eye? What if it has a contact with our skin? What should we do? There's always a solution for a problem. Okay, so what if all these things have happened except for death? So let's see, inhalation. Our first point is inhalation. If we have inhaled this chemical compound dichloromethane, we have to take proper precautions to ensure the personal safety. The victim who have inhaled it should be immediately removed to fresh air so that he can just breathe freshly. If the victim has inhaled it by chance, you should just remove the victim to the fresh air so he or she can breathe the air, the fresh oxygen. Then you have to give the victim some rest, and the other person should definitely go and obtain the medical attention immediately. When it is inhaled, it can also irritate your nose, it can irritate your throat. So it can be very dangerous for your other parts of body too. So you have to be very precautious about this compound. You have to take the medical advice. You have to move the victim to fresh air so that he can breathe freshly. Next we have is ingestion. Now what is ingestion? It comes from the word ingest, like digestion, dissolving something. So it is also the process of taking food, drink, or other substances into your body by swallowing it or absorbing it. It can be diluted with water, and you may drink that water, and then what's gonna happen? You have studied it in the risks. What can happen? It depends upon the concentration of how much you have taken it, how much amount you have taken it. Milk is not indicated for dilution, and it may increase gut absorption of methylene chloride. But definitely you have to obtain the medical advice immediately, okay? So make sure you just obtain a medical advice. If it's in contact with your eye contact, then what you have to do? People used to wear those lenses, contact lenses. They can just wear colorful contact lenses for fashion, but some also uses it for eyesight because their eyesight is weak. They use those contact lenses, and then they've just use it for their personal safety. Glasses look a little bit odd to them, so they're like, we can just wear these lenses and they are transparent, so they're not noticed. But carefulness is also required while wearing the lenses. You can sleep with it, you can wash your face, you should avoid the sand, dust particles to enter your eyes. So here, what if you are in contact with the eye, it has contacted your eyes? What you have to do first, you have to immediately remove your lenses. If you are wearing one, you have to remove them. Then you have to flush the contaminated eyes. Contaminated means the affected eyes. Then you have to flush it gently with water for 10 to 15 minutes. And while you are putting the water into your eyes, you have to hold your eyelids open wide so that the chemical can just be flushed out with the water. And definitely you have to obtain a medical advice immediately. If you have a doctor somewhere near you, you can just call it, or you can just take the person to the hospital. Bring that first aid box. It's gonna be very helpful. So we talked about eye contact. Now we have a skin contact. Now what is a skin contact? If it's in contact with your skin. What if it's in contact with your skin? First of all, you have to avoid the direct contact with the chemical. Direct contact with chemical can be very dangerous. Second of all, you have to wear those impervious gloves that are advised to you to wear in chemistry lab. And you have to remove the clothing, the tight clothing that people used to wear in for another fashion. Forgotten the reality of life, they used to do fashion. They don't know what's gonna happen after this life. Whatever. You have to remove your tight clothing, and then you have to flush the contaminated area, the affected part of the body, gently with water for 10 to 15 minutes. And definitely you have to obtain the medical advice immediately, quickly. So it's gonna be very, the advice, medical advice, when you go to the doctor, he knows more than you do. Definitely he's a doctor, he has studied much more, so you have to obtain that advice to doctor. So these were the first aid measures that what you should do in case you're in contact with. First of all, you have to avoid direct contact with any chemical. But in case if something has happened, then you have to be careful. You have to take these precautionary measures. You have to seek the medical advice very quickly, because it can damage your eyes, it can damage your skin, your liver, your heart, your every part of the body. So you should be very careful for that. So this was all about today. We studied the chemical compound methylene chloride. We will discuss some other things later, other chemical compounds, something other related to chemistry. We're gonna discuss it day by day, and it's gonna be very beneficial for you, as you have been aware for this chemical compound after listening this lecture. So it's gonna be very beneficial for you. Thanks for watching. We're gonna see you next time, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.